Good evening, I'm Andy Hodges, and welcome to ZFM Stereo's premier business show, Business Unusual, a show where we discuss everything to do with business, finance, and economics. Now, this show is going to be quite interesting because I have here in the studio ladies and gentlemen from the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority, and they are Matthias Chinanai, Juliet Matare, Paul Chingosho, and Sylvia Chauke. Thank you. Welcome to Business Unusual, and welcome for being here.
Thank you.
Now, listeners, please feel free to get in touch with us because, obviously, as you know, ZIMRA is the taxman, Zimbabwe's taxman. So please feel free to get hold of us on our WhatsApp number 073-116-8045 or our various social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. And, of course, tonight we are also streaming live on Facebook. Now, let's jump straight into this because obviously one of the major issues that has come up recently is your new Ascuda World Plus system and the fact that it was down, I believe, in December and people have had problems. And as you know, if ZIMRA has problems with their Ascuda World Plus system, that equates to loss of revenue for the country. Maybe you could just brief us on where we stand with that system as of today.
Okay, thank you. With Ascuda, we have upgraded it. It's Ascuda World, which is web-based, and our clients can submit bills of entry from anywhere, clearing their commercial goods. So it's up and running. Yes, we had problems last year, but as of now, it's running very well, and we haven't had as many complaints on it.
Right. I mean, you upgraded the system, I understand. I mean, your servers were something like 11 years old in the system or something like that. And I think recently you've then upgraded them, put in new servers and so forth. Because the issue, of course, was that, you know, if the system was down, border posts or points of entry for imports and exports or for tax purposes in particular, just were not flowing correctly. So you're saying that now that system is now being fixed and it's up and running?
Yes, we got new servers. Mm-hmm. The system is up and running, and it's running well at the moment.
I must say, though, even with those hiccups, though, you seem to have surpassed your targets. So I hope that if it was running a lot, particularly in December last year, you'd have made a bit more money for the government and for us as Zimbabweans.
Yes, the system was down, but it didn't mean that business was down. We continued. We had the business continuity plan which we were using. So it was business as usual, right, although the system was down.
Excellent. Now, one area which I think has got a lot of press was from your Commissioner General, Mrs. Mazani, who talked about corruption and how ZIMRA has a zero tolerance to corruption. She said, corruption is one of the things we find in revenue collection and we will not fold our hands. We have disciplinary and grievous procedures to weed out such bad apples. So maybe you could explain what ZIMRA is doing in terms of weeding out those bad apples.
Okay, thank you, Andy. ZIMRA has put in place mechanisms to deal with issues of corruption. We have the code of conduct for the disciplinary hearing cases, which are handled according to the ZIMRA code of conduct. We also have the whistleblower facility, where any members of the public or anyone can blow the whistle and get 10% what I could call commission.
Okay.
Or payout.
Whistleblower
yes,
payouts.
Whistleblower payouts, yes. We also have the hotlines where anyone who wants to report a case but do not want or do not wish to be paid any of that payout can just blow the whistle and advise ZIMRA through an outsourced service provider who provides that. Right. So we have got the hotlines. We also have the ZIMRA code of conduct, and we also have our own internal controls, the procedures that we use on a day-to-day basis, which cut down on that.
Right.
We also have our loss control division, which also come in handy too.
Okay. Now, these numbers, the hotline and whistleblower, you can obviously get them on your website, or do you actually have them available? Because it's important, this. Because I urge anyone out there, if you're at any border post or you're interacting with a ZIMRA official, I think that ZIMRA is in front of me and they're saying, call in, report it. tell ZIMRA what's going on. So maybe if you could give us those numbers. I think it's important.
Okay, we have the toll-free Econet line, which is 0808 190. We also have a telecell toll-free line 0732 880 880. We also have a WhatsApp facility, which is 0772 135 690. And anyone can also email on ZIMRA anti-corruption as one word, ZIMRAanticorruption@gmail.com.
Thank you very much for that. Don't worry, listeners, we will quote those numbers later on as well in the show. I think it's important that you all have them because particularly your exporters, importers, whoever has to deal with ZIMRA officials, I think it's important because as Mrs. Faith Mazani said, she's the Commissioner General of ZIMRA, I want to call upon some of us to shun corruption in line with our core values of integrity, transparency and fairness. And no one can disagree with that. Correct?
Correct.
Now, tax incentives. I wonder if we can talk about that. Recently, the President Mnangagwa, he implored Finance and Economic Planning Minister Patrick Chinamasa to consider tax incentives and tax holidays for foreign investors to encourage investment. Yes? There was then a newspaper article, I think, which Mr. Mazani said that we have to be careful about these incentives so that we don't reduce our tax base. Maybe one of you could comment on that issue in terms of tax incentives for investors or looking at our tax regime to make it more attractive.
Thank you, Andy, for that. Yes, the Commissioner General was in the press with regard to the tax incentives in response to encouragement to have tax incentives for the local industry. You will find that in terms of tax administration, the issue of tax incentives is one of the common issues that taxpayers really ask for. But what it means is when you grant a tax incentive, it means that is the revenue that you are foregoing. So before you give that tax incentive, you need to evaluate what are the possible benefits that we are going to get from the respective companies that would have been, or the respective persons that would have been given those tax incentives. So that at the end of the day, you may find our benefits may be less than the costs associated with that tax initiative. So far in the country, we have noticed that in some instances, companies will come into Zimbabwe, operate with losses, etc., and then they move out of the country or move out of the lines of the business. But when you look at whether the fiscus is benefiting out of that, you may find the benefits are not realized from a tax point of view. So that's why the Commissioner General was saying, if we give the tax incentives, then it means no one will be able to pay the tax, and then the government will not have access to financing.
But I suppose the argument is that if you gave the incentives, more investment would come in, which means that you would make more revenue from the increased investment. But as you said, you have to monitor it.
Yes, indeed. You have to monitor that and see whether really investment will come in. For instance, if I will give you an example, we have had quite a number of incentives in the current Income Tax Act. But if you look at the investors that come into Zimbabwe, there are very few. The argument is that the tax incentive is not the only issue or the most important issue with regard to investment. So at the end of the day, it should not be the one which is used to decide whether one should invest or not.
Yes, it's true. You need a basket of things, don't you? That's just one element of it.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, all right, perfect. Sorry, I'll take a comment here from Alpha in Nigeria. So we're being heard in Nigeria. Hi, Alpha in Nigeria. This is interesting because he wants me to clarify. Andy Hodges, just to clarify, ZIMRA current customs computerized system is called Ascuda World, not Ascuda World Plus. Alpha, thank you. I stand corrected. I hope that's correct. Ascuda World, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Ascuda World.
There you go, Alpha. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate you getting in touch with us. So please, listeners, if you want to get in touch with us and ask us questions about ZIMRA, anything to do with ZIMRA, we have 4 of their staff here. Please feel free to get in touch with us on WhatsApp 073-116-8045 or our various social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. And of course, we're live on Facebook on ZFM's page. Now, just to continue with this idea of tax incentives, and I'm sure, ZIMRA, you must be under a lot of pressure from people looking for tax incentives, because in our research we also thought the micro-insurance industry was also looking for tax incentives as well. Did anything happen about that, or was that just more a wish from them to say, could you give us incentives in terms of, because it's a huge business, $30 to $40 billion in annual premium revenue worldwide, so I mean, it's quite large.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Not to respond directly to the industry that you have mentioned, but already the Income Tax Act has incentives that are already in existence. So I would urge all the taxpayers and the investors to make use of such incentives. Remember, we are looking at the capital allowances that one will get, be it in mining, manufacturing, retail.
In fact, before you get into that, let's cover those taxes, because you're 100% correct. In our research, we found that they were incentives, actually, and I'm not sure whether some people out there or clients out there actually know about them, but let's cover these, because, for example, you've got build, own, operate, and transfer and bot arrangements. You have a tax holiday for 5 years. Maybe you could talk us through. You've got build, opposite, and transfer. You've got issues as mining. You've got issues to cover special initial allowances and so forth. Maybe just could touch on some of those, the ones that are pertinent to people in Zimbabwe, or that would be relevant to them in terms of how they could access these benefits.
Okay, we have the special initial allowance, which is basically a percentage of your capital expenditure. Remember, capital expenditure is not an allowable deduction, but you would get it in the form of capital allowances. 50% first year, then 25% second year, and 25% in the third year. You also have the wear and tear based on the type of asset. If you have not claimed the SIA, what we call SIA is basically the special initial allowance, you can actually get wear and tear instead. You have 5-year tax holidays for certain industries. Then after the 5 years, such industry would then be paying tax at the rate of 15%, whereas our current trade investment income is taxed at 25%.
Okay.
So that's an incentive.
Right. But I mean, as well, I think you've mentioned that. What about small to medium enterprises? SIA, I'm told it's 100%. Is that correct? With 50% allowed in the first year?
Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, that's a huge incentive for
SMEs. It's always 100%, but you may not get all of it in year one, but it is then spread over a number of years.
Listen, just to let you know, special initial allowance is a capital allowance which ranks as a deduction allowed on expenditure incurred on construction of new industrial buildings, farm improvements, railway lines, staff housing, and tobacco bonds. Also allowed in additions or alterations to existing items, as already mentioned. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
All right, excellent. Now, let's talk about mining companies. I mean, this is critical because, you know, a tax regime is good for investors. So when you're in a specific area, you should have a look at what tax allowances, what you can do with the tax, and ZIMRA should come in and, you know, so you can benefit from it. So mining companies, for example, so all capital expenditure and expenditure on exploration, development, and operating incurred wholly and exclusively for mining operations is allowed in full. Yes. Maybe explain that when it comes to mining.
Okay, when it comes to mining, it takes a different direction a little bit. In that, under mining, you would get all your generally, without going into specifics, you would get your capital expenditure as a deduction in full. Although there are a few limits on certain expenditures like hospitals, schools, and so forth, but everything else you would get your capital expenditure deduction in full. Okay. So you actually, this is an incentive for the mining industry, which is not available to anyone else outside mining.
Okay.
Furthermore, under mining, you don't have a limit as to how long you can carry over tax losses. Whereas in the ordinary industries, you can't carry over your losses for more than 6 years.
Right. Okay. All right. Perfect. Now I want to talk about farmers now, because you have farmers' special deductions. Is that correct? Maybe you can talk about that a bit. Yeah. Oh, it's you, because this is your area of expertise. I see. Lovely.
For farmers, they are just treated like any other industry. except that on certain capital expenses like fencing, the wares,
right. No, but I think that the difference here, of course, is that they're treated like anybody else. However, you have added extra things that they can be deducted for, correct? You talked about fencing, clearing and stamping land, sinking boreholes, wells, aerial and geophysical surveys.
Correct.
I mean, which in a way, I mean, that's fantastic because it allows the farmer, it gives, you looked at each industry and you've given each industry specific tax benefits or tax relief based on their industry in particular. That would be a fair comment.
Yeah, truly speaking, that's correct.
Okay. Well, let me take a comment, because it's quite an interesting one. We were talking about corruption earlier, and then someone says, thank goodness I've been looking for this. I've been fired from my job because I was against corruption, and I strongly believe that a whistleblower, I can recover what I lost because I wasn't paid anything they owed me. So that's probably somebody who will call. But anyway, it's just a nice statement there. Now let's talk about VAT. Now VAT, obviously, in every country is it's always a bone of contention. VAT. Maybe we can talk about that if you don't mind. So let's go through VAT for example. At the moment, what's our current VAT regime in Zimbabwe?
Okay. At the moment, the VAT rate is 15%, which is charged on the standard rated goods and the services. However, our VAT Act, which regulates the charging of VAT, provides that certain goods are zero rated, such things as bread. It also provides items that are exempt from VAT. You think of your education, health services, such things as fruits, vegetables, etc. So at the end of the day, our taxpayers are expected to collect the tax. Only those that are registered for the purposes of collecting the tax are supposed to collect that tax. And it's only those who meet the registration threshold of $60,000 within a period of 12 months, then they are supposed to register with ZIMRA. We put them on our database, then they collect the tax. Okay. So that at the end of the day, they are expected to collect the tax, submit the returns, and then on their returns, they are supposed to declare the tax that they collected and the tax that they paid at source, and then remit the difference to ZIMRA.
Right.
If there's an amount which is payable, then they pay it to ZIMRA by the 25th of the following month. And then if there's a refund, ZIMRA will process that refund and give it to them.
Now, what about those who say they're below 60,000, but actually they aren't? Does ZIMRA, you inspect, I assume, correct? You go and you inspect. Because I can say my threshold is 30,000, and therefore I don't have to collect VAT. Or what is the attitude towards that? Or everybody must collect VAT?
No, it's not that everybody must collect. You may find that the VAT Act provides that those who are below the 60,000 threshold can apply for voluntary registration. But however, for any taxpayer in the country, whether you are registered or not, ZIMRA can visit you to try to verify whether really you are not eligible for registration. For instance, one may say, I'm not eligible for registration, when actually he is eligible for registration.
And ZIMRA inspectors will come and they'll find you, they'll catch you.
Yeah. It's not called catching.
Okay, well, I'm not a tax man, so catching is good. Yeah.
We will not catch you, but we'll come, sit down with you, discuss with you, provide the client education, and then assist you to be registered with us, so that you can collect the tax.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Now, let's just take a quick question. Again, this whistleblowing is hit a chord amongst the listeners. These whistleblowing incentives are good, very good. But have you ever thought of being more friendly? Because you guys are something else. You always make us feel like we are at war. I think this is about the PR, the friendliness when people phone. It's a comment from a listener. So, of course, thank you for that comment. And I would hope that...
Respond,
yes, please. Please respond. Because you must be friendly, right? You're the tax man. You must be friendly.
Yes, we have received such feedback from our taxpayers and the other stakeholders. I think we interact with taxpayers quite a lot. But would need listeners to understand we are also doing self-introspection and listening to such fair comments. And programs are being pursued, instituted at the moment to try to ensure that we do the right thing for the clients. For example, recently the Commissioner General changed what we used to call the investigations division. It is now called the Revenue Assurance Division, which is trying to show a movement in a trajectory which supports the taxpayer rather than to be looking at the taxpayer as someone who is a criminal or something like that.
Right.
So we appreciate those comments. They give us strength to be able to define a new dimension. So,
excellent. Well, thank you for those comments. I think it's important to know what fiscal incentives are for. I mean, at the end of the day, they're for income generation, export promotion, employment creation and skills transfer, small business development, industrial development, and revenue inflows. And I think that any tax code in any country must be geared towards that, to giving money to the fiscus, as well as promoting trade and promoting employment and making sure your companies aren't overburdened with tax. Indeed. It is interesting because your Commissioner General, Mrs. Mazani, she said that in reality our tax rate is actually quite good compared to other areas in the region. However, our own finance minister, Patrick Chinamasa, actually said that he thinks that the tax regime is a bit too high and should be looked at. What would you comment on that?
Thank you, Andy. It would be difficult to give a precise comment to that with the hindsight that we may not be aware what considerations had been put.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me clarify for you. It said the Zimbabwe. This is your own Mrs. Mazani. She said the Zimbabwe tax rates are comparable to other countries in the region. For instance, Zimbabwe rate of corporate tax is 25, comparable to Zambia 35, South Africa 28, and Nigeria 30. What makes Zimbabwe's situation unique is a level of non-compliance. And then recently, when the Minister Chinamasa actually said, he said, taxation, I agree with you, is too high, said Minister Chinamasa while responding to contributions from participants who attended the President's meeting with Zimbabweans in the diaspora in January. It is a matter that we are going to address so that we can proceed to move to a position where we get more taxes from more volumes. I think that clarifies it a bit. I understand the balance, correct. There has to be a balance. But according to Mrs. Mazani's figures, our corporate tax of 25%, which I understand you could be revising, is comparable to other countries.
Yeah, indeed. And I think when you look at the nominal rate, I think just comparing the nominal rates will show you that our rate is comparable even beyond the region at 25%. But I think what the taxpayers are saying is, what is the effective rate of tax? I think we also attended one of the recent workshops where the taxpayers were saying the rate of tax is 25%. There's also VAT. There are also these other taxes. So it's like that at the end of the day, if one is to look at the effective tax that is paid from a certain amount of income that is earned, possibly the tax rate is far much more than 25%. So I think in terms of the effective rate of tax which is paid out of a given income, the tax may be high. That is what the taxpayers are saying. I also think that the economic conditions in the country differ, such that a lateral comparison of tax rates between Zimbabwe, Zambia, and the other countries may not, at the end of the day, give us a real position of what it is. I think the minister was taking it from the point that currently the economic situation is as it is, which would mean possibly the tax rate needs to be looked into in relation to the economic performance, such that possibly we create an incentive for the taxpayers to be able to possibly participate on a good footing.
Right.
But otherwise, when you look at the nominal rates, we are okay, because we are aware there are countries that even charge rates of tax of 50%. So,
are you looking at reducing that tax rate from 25%? Is that something that's being discussed in ZIMRA and with government?
I may not be able to confirm that, but I think from what you have said, the minister, from a policy point of view, he has acknowledged to look into that.
Okay, that's great. All right, listeners, unfortunately we're going to have to hit for a break, so please join me after the break when you can ask my guests here from ZIMRA questions on our WhatsApp number 073-116-8045 or our various media platforms, Facebook and Twitter, and of course we're streaming live on Facebook, ZFM Stereo's Facebook page. So join us after the break and we'll continue this discussion. Welcome back to Business Unusual. In the studio tonight, we have 4 members of the ZIMRA, Zimbabwe Revenue Authority. And to carry on from our discussion, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about customs issues. For example, the import VAT deferment, and also the commercial rebates. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about how ZIMRA is handling those and give us a bit of background on that.
Okay, thank you, Andy. On the issue of commercial rebates, our industry is ailing at the moment. And to promote our local industry, we provide some rebates for industries. For example, capital equipment at the moment can be imported duty-free without payment of duty and without payment of VAT, where the equipment has to be commissioned within 6 months of importation. So many industries have benefited where they are recommended by the relevant industry ministry. It may be the mining industry, the agricultural industry, manufacturing industry. They can apply to the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Finance has authorized importation of capital equipment where they are allowed to import without payment of duty and VAT as well. But they have to commission that equipment within 6 months.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is to incentivize people who can bring in equipment and so forth.
Yes.
And the other issue, you got your import VAT deferments and you've got your commercial rebates, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How is that working? Do you see an uptick in people utilizing that? Because it seems like quite a good thing to have if you're bringing in equipment.
Yeah, the uptake is very high. A lot of industries, companies are actually using that facility where they are importing their equipment, and the Minister of Finance is actually approving those importations where the equipment is being imported.
And this will be relevant, particularly with all the huge investment that's coming in, in terms of mining and so forth. I think there's $12-13 billion already signed in terms of mining facility or mining projects that are going on. So, I mean, those are the kind of people that would benefit. And anybody else who's coming in to invest and bringing in equipment. Is this correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's true. The local companies are the ones who are benefiting from those.
All right, excellent. Thank you. So these are good benefits. I think it's important for everyone to read, to understand what benefits, what ZIMRA can give you, what rebates and so forth. And I think a lot of people see taxes as something which is not understandable. It's too confusing and you don't want to know about it. Every time the tax year comes up, you start saying, oh, no, I don't like this. And I think it's important that, apart from the fact that, yes, you must pay the tax man, there are also incentives, and you must do some homework as businesses and find out what is available to you and what you can do from it. So that's excellent. Now, there's 2 things sorry, ma'am. Yes, please.
In addition to the commercial rebates that Juliet has been talking about, there is an issue of VAT deferment on importation. A company or an importer can then make an application through their ministry. Once they are supported, they can import and pay VAT after 90 days, provided that they've got the authority to do so.
Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. So it's okay. So please, also VAT on the import side.
Yes.
Okay. Correct. Now, I want to link 2 things together, if you don't mind. There's been comments that the 4 billion debt that you are owed, okay, which is pretty much almost as much as you're supposed to collect in this year, which is 4.3 billion. They say the 4 billion debt is uncollectible, okay? And I believe, the way I want to link it into the amnesty, because there is an amnesty that is ongoing at the moment, which expires on the 30th of June. So maybe you could talk about your plans on how you're going to get the 4 billion, because obviously that's a lot of money. And also maybe the issues about the amnesty and, talk us through that if you don't mind.
Okay. Thank you. And yes, the debt is now around $4 billion. I would say part of the debt may be uncollectible. Part of the debt is also collectible. But you see, for one to conclude that this debt can be collected, this debt may not be collected, there are certain procedures that we are supposed to follow. It means we have to engage the particular taxpayer, discuss with them, and then try to put in place a payment plan. And we have noticed that most of the taxpayers are finding it quite difficult to pay the tax. But we may find those matters may be transitional. For instance, we are looking at the new dispensation, which may mean that possibly if the economy revives, then it means the debt can be collectible. Maybe it's an issue of timing differences. So this is also one of the reasons why the minister in the budget statement for 2018 indicated that taxpayers were finding it difficult to pay the tax, and therefore extended an amnesty, so that those who could pay the tax by 30th of June 2018, then the interests and penalties that are associated with that tax would be waived in full. The reason was that also this debt is made up of a large chunk of penalties and interest.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at the numbers, the principal is $2.2 billion.
Yes.
Penalty, $981 million. And interest, $1.18 billion.
Yes,
so of the $4 billion, only really $2.2 billion is core tax.
Yes.
The rest is penalties and interest.
Yes.
So you're saying that if you can do this by 30th, you won't pay the penalties and you won't pay the interest.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So the question that ties me to the...
maybe
sorry, mate.
You'll notice that also on Sunday, the Commissioner General published a public notice in the newspaper to say, yes, the tax amnesty will be coming to the end on the 30th of June. But then how do we move forward to ensure that possibly taxpayers find a reprieve with regard to that? So there are also initiatives that are being pursued to ensure that the taxpayers will be in a position to make arrangements with ZIMRA and pay the tax that is being owed. For instance, the Commissioner General in this public notice number 22 has indicated that if there are any taxpayers who have not taken advantage of the tax amnesty to declare any omitted income, and also if they are having any outstanding obligations, they can come forward from 1 July up to 30th or 31st of December and declare through a voluntary disclosure program that they have these obligations they did not meet, there's this tax that they did not meet, and then enter into payment arrangements with the Commissioner General, such that at the end of the day we eliminate part of the debt problem which is there, and also try to extend a program of assisting the tax.
Because obviously, the ammunition you have against defaulters is garnishing their accounts and obviously the fines. But as we know, garnishing accounts has a negative impact on people's operations, because you garnish their bank accounts. It kind of stops them from operating, and in a way, even though they owe money legitimately, it also hampers them being able to pay you in the future, because you basically almost shut them down not shut them down, but you've garnished their accounts, correct? Yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Garnish orders, as we always say, they are a last resort. Garnish orders are not used on clients, or what we call taxpayers, who are in talking terms with the ZIMRA. So as long as you acknowledge your debt and you have a plan to pay it, you present it to ZIMRA, then you honor the payment plans. But then garnish orders normally apply to a class of clients who do not want to come forward to ZIMRA to say, this is what I owe and I intend to pay it in this manner. Right. So garnish orders for an ordinary taxpayer, it should not be a challenge.
This is at the end, the last end resort, end of the road, so to speak. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, but also take note, and the garnish order is not the worst case scenario.
Oh, okay. There's worse than garnish order.
There's worse than garnish order. The Act allows us to prosecute. The Act allows us to attach movable property. So.
Have you actually done this recently in terms of taken defaulting clients to
prosecution?
Court?
Yes, they've been prosecuted. Right. I think on the attachment of property,
maybe
very limited, if any. So those are not the worst case. Like Paul is saying, it is after we have failed to agree with someone, or someone is not meeting the terms, and also taxpayers will just come to you and take advantage of you and such things. So you put in these measures. They are not measures designed by us as ZIMRA, but they are measures that are in the law. Right. And the law already says if this happens, then you place a
I mean, they always say people don't like death and taxes, but unfortunately taxes sometimes is important. Indeed. Because this taxes is what makes things work, particularly governmental side.
Yes.
It's what government uses to fund itself, to put infrastructure development and so forth and so on.
Yes,
So it's critical that we all comply. There is a question from Jakilo. He says, good evening. Who qualifies for the 30 June tax amnesty and how does one go about it?
Okay, thank you. The tax amnesty applications should be in by the 30th of June 2018. These applications are in respect of debt that became due before the 1st of December 2017 and are still unpaid. So a client would make an application. What the application means when accepted is the full interest and the full penalty corresponding to the principal that is due is actually written off once the client is paid by the 30th of June 20.
Okay, so anybody who is in default or who owes, they fall under this amnesty,
including those that have not been assessed by ZIMRA, but they know that we owe ZIMRA this much. Even if they don't hold an assessment to that effect, they can still come in and apply and qualify.
And I think the point here is that if you do go to ZIMRA for an amnesty, don't expect those bad things that we talked about to happen to you when you walk in the door. It's all done in good faith. ZIMRA, it's a law. You have an amnesty, so if you walk in, you tell you exactly what the story is. You can work things out with ZIMRA and the penalty and the.
And we have put in place staff that are waiting for those amnesty applications.
Waiting, maybe that's the wrong word, right? No.
So in particular, when such applicants come, they are actually going to be received with two hands.
Okay, yeah, 2 hands. I like that. They'll be received with 2 hands. I like that very much indeed. Okay. Because, I mean, now one thing I wanted to also touch base on is that, we talk about this 4 billion, but this is not peculiar to our country, is it? I mean, this fact that people owe taxes and the way that we have to go about collecting it, it's pretty common. It's always going to be a battle, isn't it, in terms of people paying taxes and collecting it. I mean, it's just the way it is of the world. So I think to give you an idea, I mean, South African Revenue Services is owed about, 30 million taxes by active taxpayers. And also, South Africa is resorting to a lot more criminal prosecutions, I understand, to enforce compliance, rather than your approach of it being the last resort. So, Jakilo, basically, look, don't forget, 80% of the 4.4 billion is owed by the private sector. Correct, yes. And I think 30% is owed by individuals. By individuals. So basically, Jakilo, to answer your question, everybody is open to the amnesty, individuals or private sector. So make use of it. And after June the 30th, you can continue having a conversation about that.
From a legal point of view, we say any person is able to apply for amnesty, whether it's an individual, it's a company, it's a partnership, or it is a trust or any other arrangement that you are supposed to account for tax, they can apply for amnesty.
Got you, brilliant. Yeah. Now, I wanted to touch on something else, because we've picked up a lot of complaints that seem to be coming through from the diplomatic community about, well, one, the Swiss envoy who recently left was complaining about ZIMRA's aggressive tax collection style. And also, I think there's also VAT, and I believe you had a meeting with diplomats recently where you discussed the VAT and aspects towards diplomats and foreign companies. So maybe you could talk about that. They said aggressive collection style may result in the collapse of many of the country's remaining firms. This is what the outgoing Swiss ambassador, Ruth Huber, had to say. Would you have a comment on that?
Okay, thank you, Andy. I wouldn't want to really comment about what the statement that you are referring to. But rather to state what taxes such foreign missions diplomats have in Zimbabwe. For VAT refunds, we say any VAT that they incur in Zimbabwe. Remember, when they walk into a shop, they purchase, they are given an invoice, they can claim that invoice, they can get the VAT component of that expenditure back to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. All right.
But on a general note, yes, we are, if at all we have been aggressive, we are not supposed to be like that. I think we alluded to the fact that ZIMRA is rebranding. You remember I was saying we used to have an investigations unit, and we are saying it's now revenue assurance. And so this rebranding process will go on in order to change the way we have been doing business, so that we also bring in the interest of the customer into perspective.
Right. I can see what you're saying, because at the end of the day, if someone owes money and you keep chasing them for money, they think that you're being aggressive. When actually you're chasing them because they owe you money. But anyway, at the end of the day, it's about. It's about the client, if I can call us the clients, and you, ZIMRA, coming to an agreement and talking. And I have a comment here from a listener that says, about those numbers, can you give us numbers where we as the public can report to you unfriendly officials? That way we can help you achieve your goal of having a makeke organization. I like that. Yeah. No, it's important, because it isn't just corruption, is it? It's also people who are rude or whatever. So please give us those numbers again.
Okay. Thank you, listener. The toll-free Econet line is 0808 190. I will take that again. 0808 190. The toll-free telecell line 0732 880 880. That's 0732 880 880. Then there is also the ZIMRA anti-corruption email, which is zimraanticorruption@gmail.com. Then we also have the WhatsApp number, which is 0772 135 690. And just to remind the listeners that the toll-free hotline is managed by an independent service provider and not ZIMRA.
Ah, okay, good. Yeah, so you're not reporting to the same organization that has
not
the same.
All.
All right, well that's good. Thank you very much for that. And I think you can find these numbers on your website. Is that correct? And your website is
www.zimra.co.zw.
Okay, now there is one area we've missed, and I do apologize. There's also amnesty on customs issues, correct? Maybe you could talk us through that.
Yes, there is amnesty on customs issues, but the deadline is according to the law. Goods that were imported and penalized maybe before the 1st of December 2017, but there are exceptions on those goods, being goods that have been seized, goods that have been detained. You cannot claim amnesty or apply for amnesty on those goods.
Okay, so if they're brought in and they're detained at the border.
At the border.
For
or inland.
Okay, for whatever reason,
yes,
bad paperwork.
As long as they've been detained or seized or forfeited to the state, you cannot apply for amnesty on them.
Okay, all right, okay. I hope that was clear. Yeah, okay. All right, so don't get your car seized or whatever, right? All right, no, okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Let's take another question, because this I think is also important. And we have lots of, as I said, I always know with my guests here we can talk for hours. And this is an interesting subject to me. I mean, it may not sound interesting to a lot of my listeners, but it's very interesting to me. It's about cars. Because the question is this: can the esteemed officers kindly explain on car import duty? I buy my car from Japan for $150, but when I get to the port of entry, ZIMRA uses different figures altogether. Now, that has been a complaint, I think, progressive, and it's always been a complaint. It's not something that's new. Like, I buy a car for $1,000, I can show you my invoices and so on. I get to the border, you tell me, sorry, the car's $3,000. Can you explain that?
Okay, thank you, Andy. On the cars, I'm sure he's talking about valuation.
Valuation,
where
yes.
we reassess values.
Yes.
We use the open market value when an item is imported. So those are private imports. When they come, we look at the prices from the economy where they are importing. If they are importing from Japan, we have information on how much a Toyota Corolla costs. And that amount should be an amount which is available to anyone on the open market. If they negotiate and get some discounts, some of those discounts may be disallowed, where we reassess to make sure that we level the playing field so that everyone pays the same duty on that item which is being imported.
Okay, but let's say, for example, my car is a 10-year-old, let's say 8-year-old car, right? But your assessment is for Corolla, which was made 3 years ago. I mean, can that happen? Or do you have prices for 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, and so on?
Yes, we have prices for the different ages of the vehicles. Okay. And we also look at the condition of the vehicle, where we can actually depreciate the value to take care of the condition of that vehicle.
Okay, and can people contact ZIMRA to identify or find out what these prices are, these customs are, or values of these cars? Is that possible? Because it always hits you when you're at the border, doesn't it? You know, you get there and you got an invoice saying you bought it for $200, and all of a sudden you guys say, it's actually worth $3,000. You must pay this. Is there a way that anybody can find out about these figures?
Okay. As ZIMRA, we want to be fair to our clients. We give them a chance to declare their values. So for us then to predetermine a value before the client comes, it's like we are not giving them that fair chance to make a declaration, and an open and correct declaration.
Okay, but can't you say, for example, that a Corolla, X years, this is going to be, that's how much we're assessing it at? I mean, surely you can tell me that. You're not making it I can come and declare less or why and then talk to you, but surely you could tell the people what you would, can you not? Or?
No, we can't do that, because the cars will be in different conditions. So it's very difficult to put a straight figure for a particular car, because we need to look at the car to see what the open market value of that car is, and also to look at the condition, because we handle the cars differently. Because a 5-year-old imported by used by me may be different from a 5-year-old car, the same car used by Sylvia, because we handle the vehicles differently. So we need to see the vehicle at importation and also look at the condition.
So is that value then dependent on the actual ZIMRA official who's looking at your car as you bring it in? Because it appears that that's what you're talking about. You're talking about it's in the hands of an individual who's at the border, who's looking at your car to determine the price. Is that correct?
No, we have our own valuation database where we actually liaise with the car dealers from where the cars are coming. They actually give us price lists of how much those vehicles cost, although some people may negotiate and get lower values for whatever reason.
Right.
But we as ZIMRA, we use the value which is an open market value, which is available to anyone who approaches and buys that vehicle.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of the fact that you don't want it to be left in someone's hands somewhere, because obviously that's open to corruption. I mean, the guy gets paid a little bit extra, he reduces the value, and so on. I mean, these are common stories where I'm not saying anything that you don't know, correct? So
there are actually guidelines available for officers which they strictly use. And it's not according to any individual. Okay, and
of course there is the complaint process if you think that you haven't been treated correctly or whatever, something funny is going on. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we also have checks and balances in place whereby even if the officer is to value a motor vehicle, we always have the supervisor can also confirm that particular. In most cases, the supervisor or other senior officers confirm those assessed values to make sure that they are fair and actually reasonable.
No, I think this is so critical, because even the comment I've just had now, there you go, ZIMRA. What open market are you talking about? Most cars are $100 to $1,000, and you usually charge double of your so-called open market, because all prices are there on various websites in Japan. And I think it's important, is that, sure, you can see a price on a website, and it says $200, and another site will say $150, and so on, but ZIMRA cannot operate that way. You have to operate on one basis. And your basis that you're operating on is a mean average open market value of that car on its years? Or is that what you're working on in terms of the assessed value?
As we said, our valuation system as well, we value on a cost, insurance and freight basis. So you can have an FOB value of $20 on a car from Japan. But we also include the freight, which is the ocean freight up to Durban if it's coming via Durban. We also include the road freight from Durban to the border, to the entry point. Like if it's coming up to through Beitbridge, we charge duty on the cost of freight from the ocean, from Durban.
Okay, so it's not just the value you buy that car when it's sitting in Japan somewhere.
Yeah.
It's all of those attendant costs to get it to that border post.
The insurance, the freight, the port charges at Durban, and all those charges.
Okay. So look, unfortunately, as I said, we could talk all night, as I can with most of my guests. But one thing I'd like to just highlight, I think, which is important, is your revenue collection in the first quarter. I have numbers for your first quarter, and your numbers are what, up almost 32% from targeted to actual. Are those numbers correct?
Mm-hmm.
The numbers of revenue collection for quarter one.
We've been exceeding our target. Yes.
You've been exceeding your target.
Yes.
And that's mainly down to what? Extra? Is that more people paying taxes? Is it increased tax collection? Is it what someone call it, aggressive tax collecting? or is it just because you seem to be doing quite well in terms of collecting revenue?
I think you would also notice that not that we are aggressive. The dynamics in the economy have also changed. I think if you remember the previous regime, most people were going to buy goods and services outside the country, and then they would lose out. But over the years, due to changes in the legislation, we found our local industry, the retail outlets, supplying goods and services, which has increased the volumes of production and sales in Zimbabwe. You would also notice that the use of the electronic payment systems has also moved a lot of business to the formal side. So at the end of the day, you find generally the economic performance
people can then
also
start paying their taxes.
in improving.
Perfect. All right.
And so the tax has also been responding.
Shame, unfortunately, we only have 2 minutes left, but I can ask one more question before we finish up our show. The question is from a listener. Can you ask about returning residence rebates? Maybe someone could very quickly, unfortunately, because we've only got 2 minutes on this. Returning residence rebates.
Okay, returning residence rebates. We are talking about the traveler's rebate. That's one of those, where if you are traveling from out of the country coming to Zimbabwe, you get a rebate of $200, where we are saying you can import goods for your own personal use without paying duty up to $200 or equivalent. Then also for immigrants, those who are coming to settle in Zimbabwe, maybe on employment or to reside in Zimbabwe for whatever reason, when they are coming to settle, they bring their household and personal effects without payment of duty, including one vehicle. Okay. And also residents of Zimbabwe, we have been on an extended stay outside of at least 2 years. When they are coming back, maybe they were working in South Africa, they terminated their employment, they want to come back, or they were studying in South Africa, a 3-year degree, they finished, they want to come back. Then when they come back, they can bring their household and personal effects, which they have owned prior to coming to Zimbabwe.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. All right, and this information, of course, as usual, is available.
It's on the website.
Yes, so just go there and you'll be able to see it. Well, I think we've come to the end of our show for tonight, and it was a great show, and thank you very much for this. Taxes are always, as I said, taxes always seem to be complicated, but actually talking to you, we can get to the bottom of it. Thank you for that. So I'd like to thank my guest, Matthias Chinanyai. Thank you for that, Matthias. Juliet Matare. Juliet, thank you. Paul Chingosho. Paul, thank you, mate. And Sylvia Chowki. Thank you very much, Sylvia, for coming. I appreciate that. And of course, we end. And this is a quote from the ZIMRA Commissioner General, Mrs. Faith Mazani. She says, "Only about a quarter of registered taxpayers are compiling with their tax obligations. This leaves the tax burden on the shoulders of a few companies and individuals. I therefore pose this question. Are we playing our part to build a sustainable Zimbabwe through payment of our taxes due to the fiscus? Something to think about. Good night, and you all be safe."
Thank you, listeners.
Business Unusual, separating economic facts from fiction.